Welcome back to Shedlock 2000's Land Rover Garage and many interesting things. Well, Happy New Year to you all, I suppose, is what we first need to get on with, isn't it? I hope this year is healthy and prosperous for you all, and you get, a lot of success in your adventures and an opportunity to spend more time in your Land Rover, I suppose, more than anything else, especially in the snow if you live somewhere that gets it. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. This is the first video of the new year, and it sort of came about for two reasons, really. First thing, I was obviously changing my oil and fixing some piping that had gone amiss. One of the benefits of doing your own sort of bits of maintenance is that you can see things as you, or at least you should be doing. You should be looking for things that just don't look quite right. And I'd popped the bonnet on this to swap the engine oil, and I'd noticed that some of the coolant pipes had gone across the top of the engine. I'll show you a photograph of them. Some of the coolant pipes hadn't really lined up right since Land Rover had changed the supercharger isolator, and that sort of thing. It bothers me a bit, really, because pipes rub together and then you get holes and then you get coolant loss, and then it's a tragedy is what it is. Anyway, I'll show you a bit of a clip of that and you'll see what I've been up to. But the second, I don't know why I'm carrying this, the second reason that I want to just have do a bit of a quick video is because somebody new to the channel, and I forget his name, but somebody new to the channel had asked me a question. He's thinking of moving to a vehicle and has bought himself an L322 and had some questions about the 5-litre engine and the infamous timing chain drama. And it's a fairly important kind of discussion, really. So, having sort of hinted at it a bit, I thought I might just do a bit more of a sort of video on it to tell you exactly what goes on. And so I shall, and this is what this is all about, basically. Now, I've got a few bits here, and I'll show you some things, but I think we better just start with a kind of an overview of the engine, so you kind of know where you are. Now, I'm not an expert on the L322, and I'm not really an expert on anything, but I know more about Range Rover Classics than I sort of do about Range Rover L322. So, sort of take what you can with a pinch of salt. I think I'm fairly right, but like I said, I'm no scholar. So, when the L322 first came out, it was a BMW design. And the engines, the V8s, and we'll talk about the petrols only, because the 5-litre that we're talking about is a petrol derivative. So when it first came out in 2002 or 3, the vehicle came with a BMW engine, a 4.4 V8. Now, be mindful that was a BMW lump, and I think it was a V62, although I can't just tell you the exact things. And about 2006 and 2007, that engine option changed, and you got a choice of a 4.4 naturally aspirated Jaguar engine or a 4.2 supercharged Jaguar engine, and they're kind of the same block but with bits of different stuff going on the top to permit the supercharger to work. Now, broadly speaking, that 4.2 and the 4.4 are considered to be kind of like the best power engine, power plant for the Range Rover, and my experiences differ. I've not had very good experiences with the 4.4. I had the 4.4 AJV8, the Jaguar engine, fitted in my LR3, and it was a disaster from beginning to end. I had a lot of drama with it, a set of injectors on it and 4 water pumps on it, and a bunch of other things, inlet manifold gaskets and tensioner pulleys and all manner of ancillary issues and heating dramas and coolant dramas and related pressurizations, and it was a not a good experience, really. although that particular engine, the 4.4 and the 4.2, from the 2006-2007 era up until 2010 are generally considered by the Land Rover boffins, the Range Rover chaps, as being kind of the paragon of power plants. And I can't just remember how many brake horse they developed, many. But in 2010 we got a bit of a facelift, although not much change to the face, but we also got a power plant option alteration, and we got the new direct injection, or new as was then, 5 litre AJ-V8. And there's a lot of talk about whether it was a Ford engine or an AJ, like a lot of Jaguar engine. And I can tell you that it was built in a Ford power plant factory, and so much of the stuff has F, Fo, Mo, Co written on it, and Ford here and there. But I am told that although there was some broad similarities between the Ford 5 litre and the AJ-V8, it's not the same engine. Now I don't know enough about the origin of that engine, or whether it was borrowed from Ford during the Ford ownership and all of that kind of stuff. I can't tell you, I don't know enough. But what I can tell you is that there are many and varied differences between the AJ-V8, the Jaguar 5 litre, and the Ford 5 litre, to the extent that very few, if any, of the components cross over at all. So I'm told. Hold my hand up to not actually knowing anything. But we'll get to the point here. The 5 litre has received quite a lot of criticism over timing chain wear, stretch and eventual failure, which caused fairly significant damage to the engine. And as this is a transition engine, can also bend valves and do quite a lot of damage. Now my mate Kevin up in Calgary, Top Banana Kevin, is a good man, a good friend of mine. I don't get to see him very often because he's a million miles away, but he helped me get back into this L322, and we met just before he had, or just after he had a bunch of drama with his timing chain letting go and bouncing various bits of the engine all over the place. Now he did the timing job himself with at a garage that he has, and had various success with that, and then had to do a bit more work on it for some other reasons. But his experience is not unusual in the sense of when the timing chain does go on this. On the 5 litres, they do go, and they bend valves and all sorts of other things. Now, basically, what the timing chain does is, if you can imagine, you've got an engine and it's in a V, and the pistons go a bit like that. While across the top of the V's, you've got your cams, and these control. They're called overhead cams because they're over the head of the piston, and these cams control the closure of the valves, and with the complexity of engines increasing, that becomes quite a technical sort of thing, and they're adjustable slightly by the speed the engine's going and a bunch of other stuff, and they're all very exciting. Now the chains that drive the cams, and there's 2 on the top of the heads, the chains that go down the front are fastened to the crank, or at least connected to the crank, such that they turn all in order, and so the valves open and close when they're meant to, and when the engine goes faster they alter the timing of the valve closures slightly, and there's a bunch of technical stuff goes on. Well, this is a chain. I don't know if you want to see the part numbers, but I can show you the part numbers. This is LR032048. Look, there you are. And this is one of the chains. Now these chains, as I've mentioned, they fit on the front of the engine, and they've got a little mark on them, look somewhere, there you are, to allow you to time everything up. But they fit on the crank, and then they go around the top of the engine, around the valve sprockets, the cam sprockets that run the camshaft. And there are 2 of them, one on this side and then one on this side, like that. Now, in order to in order to provide tension and to stop the chain slapping about, that very nearly didn't come out right, but anyway, you've got these sorts of things, and these are timing chain tensioners. Now you can see here, I'll just walk towards the camera a bit, you can see that on the front of this is this little plastic slipper affair, and this was the problem, amongst other things, with this aluminium casting. The other issue was this little chap in the back, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. But anyway, so this plastic slipper affair here that falls off for fun and now I can't get off, but this chap is designed to, actually I think it goes this way, and speaking of the thing falling off, it has done now. Anyway, so let's assume that it goes this way. It's a bit hard to show you really, but it goes a bit like this, and it sort of pushes the chain. I'm short of hands, aren't I? It sort of pushes the chain to keep the tension on it so that the chain doesn't slack. And this little chap in the back here is operated, or at least it's pushed, by a little sort of piston thing that fills full of oil, called the tensioner. It pushes on this slipper, this timing chain guide, in order to sort of take the slack out of the chain. And the problem, of course, is that when Land Rover designed this engine, when Jaguar designed this engine, and curiously for those that also have Jaguar engines in their Jaguar cars, this affair appeared as well from 2010 to about 2013. Now, in the L405s, the vehicle that followed the L322, this plastic affair had been changed, and in the back here was a hardened seat. And one of the problems that occurred with the original design was that this little bit that the piston, the hydraulic oil-filled piston presses on, it sort of eats a hole in the back of this slipper, and to the extent that it can no longer sort of keep pressure on the chain, if you see what I mean, because the piston just buries a hole in there. Now there's not a lot of wear in this one, as you can see, and I'll take some closer photographs of this, and you can see there's not a lot of wear in here. And what they did was they altered this housing to have a steel insert, so that this didn't cause any problem, and then they changed, apparently, so I'm told, in order to reduce the potential for wear. Now, when you buy the replacement kits, when you do this job, the new parts, and this part here is LR05013, LR05013. When you buy this part, of course, you're buying the updated bit. And there was an attempt at a class action lawsuit in Murica. I'm not entirely sure whether it succeeded or not, but anyway, there was an attempt at a class action lawsuit to resolve this problem. And if you add upwards of 100,000 miles on your engine, or before 100,000 miles on your engine, apparently the intention was that Land Rover would give you some money towards getting this particular job done, because it was a fairly big issue for them because of the catastrophic result. Now, what happens is that when that slipper plate and that timing chain tensioner guide, whatever you want to call it, when that wears, it allows the chains to slop about a bit, really, and that causes wear on the pins. So the accuracy of this chain hinges upon wear in these little tiny pins, and I'm going to hold this up here, but I'm not sure whether it'll focus. These little pins that hold all of the links together, these obviously have more or less wear, and excessive pin wear will of course cause this to stretch, at which point, instead of being like that, it sort of becomes a bit like that, and then it rolls around and wears more, and the timing of the engine isn't right, and then it'll jump a tooth or skip a thing, and then bangety bang, and the engine's all done. Now, This problem has plagued earlier 5-litre engines, and because it's a wear-related problem, the issue doesn't really pop up until somewhere between 50 and 100,000 miles. But, and here's the but, it is a well-known, well-understood problem to the extent that Land Rover may or may not have been involved in a class action resolution, and there may or may not have been a service bulletin or whatever they call it. But I do happen to know of quite a few of these 5 litres in America at least, and a couple in Canada that have got very high mileage on them. Sort of 500,000 miles, and my last one had 450,000 miles. My mate Kevin's failed earlier on, but his has got quite high mileage as well. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I mean, there's definitely a mechanical issue because there's a material problem with the valve guides, that goes without saying. But I think that can be sort of, the damage and the wear can be sort of reduced by more frequent oil changes, and I'll explain why actually, because these little tensioners, for want of a better description, hydraulic tensioner or a pusher or whatever you want to call them, they're just a mechanical fit. As you can see, they sort of they fit in here and slide just because of oil tension and viscosity on the part itself, and the oil comes out. There's sort of a constant pressure affair, and if the viscosity of that oil changes, or if you're using a different viscosity oil, and if you are using a different kind of oil, and if the oil contains a lot of suspended particulates, then those particulates can act a bit like a sort of a grinding paste. They can start to wear things apart, and while the viscosity of the oil likely remains good in these long drain oils, the oil nevertheless absolutely contains more particulates, as I've shown you in earlier videos. You know, the suspended stuff within the oil that comes out of the wear of the engine, that's sort of pocketed up by the oil, that itself is problematic, and it becomes bad for the engine, and it can wear these very sensitive parts and cause, you know, an increase in pressure or decrease in pressure, or a wear of the face of these things. You can't really see. I'll take a photograph, but there's already wear on this part where it is rubbed on something, you know, and that can be acerbated by oil with stuff in it, you know. So it's very important, I think, to swap the oil, as I've mentioned before. You know, you really need to change the oil every 5,000 miles or more, or there and thereabouts, and that can reduce the amount of suspended particulates and really help those the oil do its job. Now, I'm not going to say that that will protect you from any kind of protect you from previous damage, because the damage has been done, but I'm also not going to say that it'll rescue you from avoiding the problem altogether. But that, I don't believe that this issue, this 5-litre timing chain issue, should put you off buying a 5-litre. To be honest, what you get from the 5-litre in the upgrade is a significant improvement on the 2007 and 2007 to 2009, because you get the adaptive suspension, and you get faster updated TRS control protocols, and you get flappy paddles and a bunch of other things that you can put on there. Different transmission protocols, different mechatronics unit in the transmission. Anyway, a bunch of things, and the drive of them is quite a lot different. And although they're more money because they're newer, if you look for one that doesn't have that timing chain done, you'll probably spend 10 grand less, and that'll give you some coin to get the job done and know that it's been done right. Anyway, I'm doing this video because, as I mentioned, I changed the oil, and one of the things that I'm going to do for you in this video is I'm going to show you, if you undo that cap, you can see the chain the oil filling cap, you can see the chain, and you can get something like a long screwdriver, or better still, a sort of a piece of wood, a dowel. And when the engine's off, he says, reminding himself that people are stupid, but when the engine's off, you can poke a screwdriver, a bit of wood dowel in there, and you can push on that chain, and that will show you, or you'll be able to tell from that just exactly how much wear you've got in that chain. Well, not exactly how much wear you've got, but it'll give you an indication of how much wear you've got in that chain. This one that I'm showing you here has less than 1 millimetre of wear in it, and it's now in a bit of a mess because I've got it all tangled up. But anyway, this chain there's a less than 1 millimetre of wear in it, and the wear has to be sort of longitudinal. I mean, you're always going to get lateral movement in a chain because that's how they work, but in terms of longitudinal wear, that's the stretch literally in the chain. You can have more or less, and this one has only 1 millimetre of wear in it, so it wasn't actually a problem at the time and could have done a lot longer. As you can see from this push rod here, I mean, this pusher here comes out probably 1.5 inches, and my man at Land Rover tells me that he has seen these where the pusher engages the back of this valve guide, chain guide. He has seen these this end push almost through to the plastic, and that's probably 3/4 of an inch if no tell. So you can see there's quite a lot of adjustment in this to take that slop out, and I'm not suggesting that you should have much in the way of slop at all, because they're quite a highly tuned toleranced thing, and when you start developing a great deal of slack in the chain, you are going to affect your engine's performance. One of the things that's worth mentioning is that the direct injection is quite loud, and it differs from the 2007 engine, the earlier AJV8, because these direct injectors do tap a lot. Now what you've got going on in the background here is an engine, and the tapping you hear is actually the injectors, not the chain. The chain has a more sort of plasticky sound because it's the chain that's rubbing on that, slapping on those plastic guides that makes the noise. Anyway, that's basically what I've come to show you today, and I'll do that, show you that little video, and I think that'll be about it really. Like I mentioned, I don't think this should be a reason to put you off the 2010 model, but you should be aware of it as being a bit of a Land Rover engine issue that does affect some of the 5 litres, and it's your choice whether I suppose you want to take the risk on that, or go with a sort of a vehicle with more, I'm not going to say more reliable, because I had a lot of trouble with mine, but an engine that generally doesn't cause as much trouble as this one, at least doesn't cause this particular problem, and do without some of the more refinements. Anyway, with that, thank you very much for tuning in. Have a very happy new year to you all, and do like and subscribe to this video, he says, as he flashes the big flashy thing here. It's always good to hear from you. Thank you very much for leaving comments and letting me know that there's some material here that's of merit to you, and this, I mean, this particular topic has been sort of done to death on the forums, but if you wanted a more visualization of it, then I hope this video's helped. And with that, thank you very much. See you next time. Cheerio.